Today, March 23rd, I bring to order the adjourned meeting from March 20th, 2020. In an effort to provide access to the public who may not be able to show up because of shelter-in-place order, we will be accepting emails to citycouncil@cityofwattsville.org. Again, the email address is citycouncil@cityofwattsville.org for this particular item, from the start of the staff report to the end of the City Council's clarifying questions. Our council members will also be participating. Some will be here present and some will be participating remotely. The council meeting is being video streamed through our city website, as it usually is, and channel 70 or channel 99. It would also video stream in English and Spanish in Facebook. Since this is the first, since we are conducting the meeting in such a manner, we do ask for your patience since we may encounter technical difficulties. Emails will be read once all the public in the audience has spoken. In addition, we will also be accepting comments via phone number at area code 831-768-3527. Again, 768-3527. Please be patient since we only have one line. If the line is busy, please check back. We ask that your emails include your name for accurate record in the minutes. Also, for calling, please announce your name for our record. And for those of you that may not have an agenda at home, I want to tell you what the process is going to be for today's meeting. We're going to first have roll call. You will see that in addition to me, there are 4 other members present here in the audience. Two are at home for personal reasons, but they are already connected and will be participating remotely. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We then will have our city attorney again present to us the ordinance and his report to make sure that all council members and those at home know what it is that we're acting upon today. Council members will be asked for clarifying or technical questions. Following, then we will have the public hearing. For those that are present, and I do hear that out in the lobby we do have some people present, we will also receive phone calls and read emails. All will have 3 minutes. For those emails that might be longer than 3 minutes, do know that the council members have received your email and have read them in full already. We then, after, will return to the council for a motion and discussion. So with that, we will begin, and if our city attorney can come forward. Oh, I forgot oh God, I'm getting ahead of myself. First roll call. Yes, roll call first and then please pledge of allegiance.
Chapman Gomez, Estrada, Gonzalez, present. Hernandez, here. Hurst, here. Parker, Garcia.
Here. Okay, if I can have our Mayor Pro Tem lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we will begin. If we can have our city attorney come forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, this will be a substantially the same staff report that was presented on Friday. A little bit of an update. I'll point out where the updates are. There's nothing substantially different unless I identify it as being different. First of all, brief background because we haven't met since Friday and things are changing very rapidly. First of all, we all remember Governor Newsom issued his emergency proclamation. Then the Board of Supervisors declared emergency. The health officer issued a shelter in order. We've had an important executive order. Governor Newsom on March 16th issued his executive order number N28-20, allowing local government to enact residential and commercial tenancy moratoriums based on individual need. The statewide stay-in-place order went into effect on the 19th, and we had our meeting on the 20th. So the proposed ordinance basically says that it establishes a moratorium prohibiting evictions and deferring rent, subject to proof under the present version, during a council-declared emergency to the extent the emergency was caused by COVID-19. And my intent in drafting what I had, because we didn't have it was happening so quickly, I didn't have an opportunity to get input from the council. So I drafted something that I thought covered all the bases, at least in the short term. And my intent was to not favor the landlord nor favor the tenant, to come up with a balanced ordinance. And I divided it into 5 categories, and we'll go through those 5 categories. One is the duration of the ordinance, how long it remains in effect, during which the tenant doesn't have to pay rent. The property it's affected, residential or commercial, qualifications for deferral, second home, that sort of thing, proof, wage stubs, those things we discussed on Friday, and a repayment deadline, 90 days, 30 days, date certain, termination of the urgency ordinance, all kinds of alternatives there. As I said on Friday, the council, it's just a pure legislative decision for the council to make. There's no findings that are required. except that the finding of a urgency requiring 5 votes. Otherwise, it's a pure legislative decision. You can make a motion to adopt the staff version. You can amend it and adopt an amended version. The motion could fail. You could try another motion. You could table it. You could adjourn it as we did on Friday, and you could continue to a date certain. Okay, the first one is the duration of the moratorium. I proposed in the original ordinance that it continue in effect until the council terminated its March 10th emergency proclamation. Me thinking that if the council terminated the emergency, that it was likely that things would start again. And we had to have some date, so I picked the date that the council could determine and would know what the effect of its termination would be. Other people have done it different ways. These are alternatives you could decide as policymakers to adopt or not as you see fit. Some alternatives, some places have done 30 days and they keep renewing it. Some have done what I did, duration of the emergency. Santa Cruz City, Santa Cruz County, and Monterey County have picked a date certain, 31 days, May 31st, which is 40 days from now. So they're about 120 days, 140 days beyond my, 140 days short of my 6 months. Mine tended to favor the tenant in that one item. The next one was proposal, residential or commercial. I proposed residential and commercial because I thought they were both affected and both could tank the economy very easily until we can get things sorted out. The federal government can decide what it's going to do or not do, and people can plan ahead. Santa Cruz City proposes residential commercial. It's on tomorrow's agenda. I don't know what they'll do. That's the proposal. The county proposed residential and commercial. Again, on tomorrow's agenda. I don't know what they'll do. Monterey County had a rehearing, has a rehearing, I think tomorrow, of the ordinance that they adopted last week, I think it was, and that had both residential and commercial. You could decide residential only if you want to. It's up to you. If you could choose commercial only, it's up to you. Totally your decision to make. The next category is what triggers the right to have your eviction deferred or delayed. And everybody's pretty much the same as the language that I came up with. I said layoff, loss of hours, other income reduction, compliance with the government order, i.e. you got to stay home, you can't go to work because the state or the county or the federal government imposes some restriction on travel, or caring for a homebound child or adult or person who needs special care. Other jurisdictions have proposed substantially the same thing as I proposed. Santa Cruz City, substantially the same words under tomorrow's agenda. Santa Cruz County, substantially the same words on tomorrow's agenda. Monterey County, substantially the same words. Capitola, Scotts Valley, Salinas don't have anything on their agendas yet. And some cities don't say what the trigger is. I think that's probably leaves people to guess, which I don't think is a good idea. So I feel very comfortable with the proposed ordinance laying out a fairly exhaustive list of things that can trigger it. And also I feel comfort that other municipalities have followed us in that regard. Proof of qualification. This is a hotly discussed, thoroughly discussed on Friday, and proposed in Watsonville in the current language is verifiable documentation to support a request for deferred payment. It requires that the city hold that or the landlord hold that in confidence, that information. Other jurisdictions propose, quote, demonstrate through documentation or other objectively verifiable means. That's what Santa Cruz City is proposing tomorrow. Santa Cruz County, likewise. Monterey County rehearing tomorrow. likewise. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I'm okay with that language if that's something that gives the landlords and the tenants comfort. Doesn't expressly make a list, but it imposes some requirement that landlords and tenants are going to have to come up with at some point if they seek reimbursement from state or federal emergency funding. Rent repayment deadline. All rent must be repaid under this ordinance. It's just a question of when. And I proposed 6 months, thinking that was helpful to the tenants because I didn't know what this looked like, but it looked real bad. So I put a 6-month date on it. And other jurisdictions, this one jurisdiction put 120 days. Some expressly said, we'll decide that in the future, which I don't think is a good idea because people need to be able to predict when the money is going to be due. Expiration of the emergency. The Santa Cruz City ordinance for tomorrow does not seem to set a deadline, nor does Santa Cruz County, nor does Monterey County. I presume they'll do that by resolution sometime in the future. Other considerations were utilities. We talked about that. All other jurisdictions that I've been able to find deal with this administratively. And as I said, 5 votes were required under the Charter Section 602 as an urgency ordinance. So just to summarize the ordinance, no eviction upon demonstration of inability to pay caused by caring for household members, a layoff or other income reduction, complying with a quarantine order, a stay-at-home order, child care, or care for a severely ill family member. Tenant requirements, notify the landlord, cover the reason, a covered reason, you have to have a reason, pay when you can't, what you can, despite the emergency, and repay all within 6 months. Now, we've had some discussion with 1 or 2 council members who had specific concerns, and so I'm proposing a slight change in the existing ordinance on 2 issues. 1, changing the moratorium duration from until the council terminates the urgency ordinance to instead say May 31st, 2020. That's exactly the same as Santa Cruz City, Santa Cruz County, and Monterey County. People may feel more comfortable that we have a safe harbor there because other cities and counties are doing the same thing. The other thing I would suggest is changing the ordinance requirement of verifiable documentation to instead say demonstrate through documentation or other objectively verifiable means. Objectively verifiable means doesn't necessarily mean paper. It could be words. It could be some physical thing. Who knows what it might be, but it's up to the landlord and the tenant to figure out what objectively verifiable means. No different than a court of law when you go in and you have evidence. You present evidence and seek to prove things from evidence. It'd be the same thing here. It leaves it wide open, or not wide open. It leaves a area within which the both parties have an expectation of what it's going to take. As I said before, to the council alternatives, adopt it as amended by, as I just proposed. You can adopt the one we had on Friday. You can amend my proposed one, or you could amend the one on Friday. The motion could fail. It's make a new motion to table, or continue to a date certain. And that concludes my report, except for one thing. I wanted to address an email that we got in from the Board of Realtors regarding their concerns about why Watsonville's ordinance did not include some things that the San Jose ordinance included. The San Jose ordinance is a 20-page ordinance that melds their good cause eviction ordinance with their this ordinance and tries to fit them together. They have a 67-page staff report with a provisions that cities the size of San Jose can do with the wide variety of landlord-tenant situations they have with a highly urbanized environment, the possibility of future funding for some back-paying rent, either to the landlord or to the tenant. They have a lot of things on the table. But the things that they talk about is verifiable documentation. Why did we not have verifiable documentation? We do have a requirement for verifiable documentation. The words that are used are up to you folks to make a determination on, but it's there. Term of the emergency ordinance. They want us to follow the executive order, which allows it until May 31st. I'm okay with that. It's up to you folks to do that. That's fine. Payback to landlord. They have a kind of I think it's a difficult to administer proposal. They say if the tenant's 2 months in arrears, they have 2 months to repay. If they're 4 months in arrears, they have 4 months to repay. So everybody's slightly different. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It's certainly okay to do it. It's nothing illegal about it, but that's why I didn't do it that way. Local financial support. They're wondering why we don't have local financial support, and that's because I didn't have any money to put in the ordinance. We put this together in 48 hours because it was an urgency ordinance. The council can come back later if there are housing funds. I don't know if there are, have discussed it with anyone, but if there are, and some can be made available or some become available because of the action of the state or federal government, that's okay. You can address that at the time. And a local guarantee for landlords of payment of rent, same answer. I don't have in the 24 to 48 hours to protect the tenants and maintain the status quo, to flatten the curve so people would be less likely to be put out on the street and exacerbate the dire situation we are in right now. Didn't have time to go on and on like San Jose did. And that's why I didn't conclude it. With that, I conclude my report, and I expect there'll be questions. Mayor, I don't know what the best way to do this is, whether you wish to have the council ask all the questions and then me answer them one by one, or you want me to go back and forth. I leave it to you.
First, before I answer that one, just for clarification, my understanding is this is a proposal by San Jose City, but it has not been enacted. I mean, it hasn't been approved yet.
They had one. See, I'm trying to remember. Monterey had one. I think you're right. I don't think San Jose's is in effect yet.
Yeah, I think it's this week when it goes to city council for adoption. And so we don't know what will be adopted.
And what's happening in these cities and counties, Monterey is a good example. Monterey approved an ordinance on I think the 17th, and it's coming back tomorrow. They're refining it. So they're in the same boat we're in. Nobody knew this was coming, and they're putting things together in order to maintain the status quo and protect everyone. Doesn't mean the council, because you're in charge, doesn't mean you can't change it at some point in time. But we're trying to flatten the curve.
Okay, and so how we will proceed is this is a time for council members to ask clarifying or technical questions of you or anybody else that is necessary. So what I will ask is just raise your hand, and if you have a question, you're asked to come to the podium, and you can direct it to Alan or any other person. So we'll start with Aurelio.
Can we go first with the
Oh, we already have somebody?
On the phone, can we ask them if they have any questions first?
Oh, okay, that might be a good suggestion. So we'll start off with Ari and Francisco. Do either one of you have any questions for clarification or technical questions?
Yes, I can hear. If Ari wants to go first, she can go first. No, I defer to you back up.
So Francisco, I think, is going to go first.
You have 2 questions.
And who is this
Can you hear me,
directed?
Joanna?
Who is this directed to?
My question is, when would this officially take effect? Would it be today or the day that we declare the local emergency?
today.
Did you hear that? Today?
So, I thought I heard today. Yes. So if I wanted to, if we wanted to backtrack it, could we do that?
I don't think you can make it retroactively effective.
I did not hear that. He said that it could not be made retroactive.
Okay. And then what about so you know what? For now, that's my question for now.
Okay. Ari, did you have a question or questions?
Marty, the mayor wants to know if you have a question or questions.
Sure. Well, I don't know, maybe one's philosophical, that maybe we're stepping in a little bit prematurely. But I think Alan covered that in his presentation based on all the dates. So a question I would have before we get into it, do we have any funding that we could point in the direction of relief for landlords or renters?
Councilmember Parker, I don't know, and I don't think the finance director is in the audience. And that would be something that there's so many moving parts in that. We have reduced sales tax revenue. We're going to have reduced property tax revenue. We're going to have all these decreasing amounts. We have potential for federal state money, but nothing's been passed yet. I just don't know. I'm sure that the city manager knows a lot more about this than I do, but that would be my reaction.
Mayor and council, I will add to that. So Councilmember Parker, I think the city attorney answered it well. I would just add that there are some cities that are looking at potentially using some of their inclusionary housing funds, which are really the most flexible housing funds that we have available to us, and they're local. It's fairly limited at this point in time. I think the fund has about $100,000 available, and of course that would not meet the total needs that we're expecting. However, as the city attorney mentioned, this situation is very fluid and rapidly changing by the day. There's been lots of discussions at the federal level as part of this $1.8 trillion stimulus package of providing direct payments to cities to help provide this type of assistance, as well as providing direct payments to all Americans across the country to also provide support. So as other opportunities come before us, and when we think prudent, we will continue to bring policies forward to the council to take action to provide those additional support services. We acknowledge that landlords also have significant concerns given this unprecedented economic challenges that we're in. And we remain committed to explore any option that comes before us on that front.
Any other question, Ari?
I think it's more of just what's in what we have in this emergency ordinance. Rent freezes and late fees during this shutdown. But how is that clarified? I mean, a lot of the public and questions that they've had for us have to do with communication between, landlord and renter and what they intend to do. So here's the thought for me. How could we include that? Is that something we can include rather than just a moratorium for X many days? Just freeze it as is, and yet still maybe people will pay their rent as best as possible with conversation?
Okay, so let me unpack that a little bit. So there's a couple questions. Can we include a stay or a prohibition on late payment penalties during this period? I think so is the answer to that question. The next question was rent increases. There's a state law in effect that went into effect January 1st, 2020, I think, that capped rent increases statewide at 5% on most housing, not all housing. And that was the one that had the just cause eviction provisions in it. So I would say that that's in effect. Over in the mobile home park, we have a mobile home rent control ordinance that supersedes in that area. So there's a lot of strictures in it, but I think that the rent stabilization is probably where it needs to be.
Mobile home park protections, will they, are they included in this ordinance?
Well, the mobile home rent control ordinance only allows for rent to be increased pursuant to the mobile home rent control ordinance. And that's a initiative passed by the voters, and the council does not have the ability to change that.
I think she's referring to the eviction part.
I don't, on Friday when that question came as a pop question, I thought you could include it, but the more I think about it, and since it's a mobile home rent control ordinance adopted by the voters, I would defer to that. And if you start crafting things onto the mobile home rent control ordinance, we've been sued on that, I think 4 times already, and I would like to leave that alone if possible.
Just to further clarify on that is this ordinance.
Go ahead, Daddy.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I have a question about commercial rent and the protections that the federal government are crafting. Could you clarify your understanding of what's gone on so far, even if it hasn't been passed by Congress?
I don't think Congress has passed anything. The president said Saturday night that something was going to happen. Schumer and McConnell met yesterday, as I understand it. They were not able to reach agreement. The news that as I understand it, is that the Republican caucus wants to devote most of the money, or too much money, according to Democrats, to corporations, and the Democrats want to put the money in the pockets of wage earners, individuals, small businesses more. And they have not been able to reconcile those differences in sufficient detail that they've been able to craft a bill that they thought would get out of the Senate. That's my understanding.
As of this morning, McConnell says that there is no agreement yet.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. There is no agreement, nothing to get out of the House of Origin, which would be the Senate here. Agreed.
I can't
Mayor,
hear you guys.
Mayor, Council Member Estrada has another question.
Okay, Francisco, you had another question?
That concludes my questions at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Francisco, you have another question?
Paco, do you have another question you'd like to ask at this time?
Did he text that question to you that you could read? Oh, okay. Well, we'll hold on that. In the meantime, I will open it now to the council members here present. Are there any council members that would like to ask clarifying or technical questions of Ellen or anybody, any other staff person? Aurelio?
Oh, Tamara. Oh, shoot.
Go ahead.
Okay, Paco, Aurelio says to go ahead.
No, I can wait. Tell him to go.
Go for it, Paco.
Are you sure? I can wait.
Go for it, Paco.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aurelio. My question is for people that were recently in the last couple of weeks given maybe like no fault evictions and they're in the process of having to move out, do they still have to complete that process, or will they have to sort of suspend or postpone that eviction in light of everything that's happened so far? Thank you.
I don't know what you mean. Why each of these tenants was evicted? And what you mean by no fault?
So I guess what if people were already are in the process of being evicted, are we still going to move forward with those evictions, even though these decisions were made prior to us working on this emergency ordinance?
Well, a couple things I would say is one is I don't know why they were evicted. If they didn't pay the rent beforehand, it could be for a lot of reasons. I would say that this ordinance is not retroactive, as we talked about earlier. So I don't think you could apply it to evictions that occurred a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, for example.
I guess so. My question was, if people aren't allowed to go, are people allowed to go see houses right now? Are there open houses, or can people look at apartments to be able to get another home right now, or is that not allowed because of the shelter in place?
I don't know. I think people can go and find housing. There are certain necessities of life, and if you were evicted from a residence, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to find another residence.
And Mayor and Council, I can add to that. 1 second. I would also add to that the county health order and now the state shelter at home order that applies statewide has placed a premium on continuing to move housing construction forward and placing a high priority on maintaining housing. So I would interpret the state order as continuing to place a high priority on keeping residents housed. And I think that can be done so following all social distancing guidelines within the order as they look for housing during this time.
Is that all your questions, Francisco?
That is it. Yes, tell the mayor I said thank you.
Okay. Aurelio, then?
Just go back to the mobile home units. Now, the attorney has stated that it's on their rent control ordinance. The no eviction I don't think would fall under the rent control ordinance because it's just a no eviction ordinance. So can we cover them for the no eviction part only? Because we're not going to be increasing no rents or
Just say what I said before. Have 5 mobile home park owners in Watsonville, and if they were to challenge this, and I would not want to see the mobile home rent control ordinance litigated at the expense of the mobile home tenants. And I think that is a distinct possibility. There's no case law. I can't give you a black and white answer that it would or it would not. I believe it would not be a good decision to impose that on the existing comprehensive mobile home rent control ordinance.
not putting it on their ordinance.
Well, what's happening is no, I understand. I understand that you're not amending the mobile home rent control ordinance, but you're affecting the mobile home rent control ordinance. A tenant is in a dispute with a landlord about the rent that is being paid, and the tenant raises this as a defense. The landlord says it applies. The landlord says it doesn't apply. The tenant says it does apply, and you get into those kinds of fights. So it's your decision to make. It'd be my inclination not to do it. I can't give you a black and white answer. That's because there's never been a case that has had a COVID-19 emergency ordinance rent control rent moratorium imposed on a comprehensive mobile home rent control ordinance.
Aurelia, I'd like you to clean the mic with the wipes that we have right there to your
Mike.
even in front of you if you want, if you would like. Okay.
When I walk away, I'll clean it. Okay.
Okay.
It's gonna be cleaning and then cleaning and cleaning it.
We are clean.
Let me clean after I'm done. I think that'll be a lot better, and it'll save wipes. On section B, on page 3, is there any? Can we allow wordage that says where it says at the end a 3-day or quit notice or otherwise endeavor to evict the tenant? Can we add engage in any other form of retaliation or debt collection? Is there anything wrong with that wordage?
Well, the only thing I would say is this is tied to COVID-19. And so if I understand your language, you're adding additional provisions above and beyond COVID-19, which probably are not an emergency.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there other council members that would like to ask clarifying or technical questions? Trina, can you come up to the podium, please?
No one's talking right now.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have several questions. So when you're ready. The first question I have, there's a great deal of concern that the government is stepping in prematurely on property owners' rights. What exposure would this policy leave the city for litigation against property owners that feel the policy is stepping into legal territory of taking their rights away?
There's always a possibility. I think there's not a probability. The reason I say I don't think there's a probability is I'm hoping that this will be a narrowly tailored intrusion into the landlord-tenant situation that's tied expressly only to COVID-19, number one. Number two is the governor in his executive order, was it 27-20, expressly said to local government, both as the commercial and as the residential, I think you should move forward on that as you see fit. So I think the combination of those two, and also I guess the third thing is I don't expect this to be long-term. I expect it to be short-term. So my thinking is that this is not an unreasonable, I can't guarantee you somebody won't sue, but I think it's a reasonable effort for the city to make under the circumstances, and I would feel comfortable if the council adopted a narrowly construed as proposed moratorium.
The Santa Cruz Community Foundation has received funds, and we know that there are some resources from the Community Action Board, which is the rent notice that they have, the rent program, RAD or something like that they have. What are we providing our community with those resources or access to information about those resources that they can go to for help?
That's outside my area of expertise.
Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, I can take a crack at that. So we are in the process of sharing a long list of new resources that have been made available over the last week. And again, this is rapidly changing. There are new financial aid programs that are being offered daily. They range from housing assistance programs coming out of the Housing Authority, grant fund programs that have been set up by the Santa Cruz Community Foundation and other groups as well. And as part of that, we are also looking at ways that we can connect our residents with new unemployment benefits that have been made available by the state and disability benefits that have been made available by the state. And I think it's really important for the community to understand that what the council is considering today is not a rent forgiveness program. And it's really important for our families and our renters to continue paying what they can. What this framework allows for is discussion between a tenant and a landlord to reach some agreement during these unprecedented times and ensure that our families, as best they can follow the shelter at home order especially given how critical these next 2 weeks are for us to slow the spread of this virus and try for all of us to get back to our normal lives.
And what happens when the tenant stops paying their utility bills with the city? Are you going to be writing these off if the tenants have vacated that property? Does it go to the landowner in terms of the debt for the utilities if they go and they leave without paying?
So currently, utility bill payments are the responsibility ultimately of the property owner. So if a tenant leaves a property with unpaid utility bills, those unpaid utility bills fall on the responsibility of the property owner. We have during this time, and I mentioned this at our last meeting, put some interim protective measures in place of waiving late fees as well as halting shutoffs in response to the financial challenges that many of our families are facing. But again, in those cases, we are still encouraging utility bill customers to pay what they can, because ultimately the responsibility of paying your utilities and your responsibility of paying rent is not going away.
So in an example of this one, the example would be, when would you notify the landlord that the tenant hasn't paid, that they would then ultimately be responsible for that bill? Because that will be a part of the process if a tenant non-payment of trends, perhaps between not paying rents to not paying utility bills, and then the landlord not discovering until you send them a bill or send them to collection instead. So what is our process in that regard?
So those challenges do come up from time to time, and we are actually in the process of changing the way unpaid bills are communicated to the property owner, so that a property owner is not surprised with a large stack of unpaid bills over several months. And so our utility staff now send those notifications to both property owner and tenant to try to cut down on the amount of surprises.
You're going to get your exercise in today, aren't you?
I'm getting my steps in.
What participation does the housing authority have in this process for their clients in assisting them?
So we have been in regular contact with Jenny Panetta, the executive director for the Housing Authority, and I know the mayor has as well. They are working very closely with their Section 8 tenants and their landlords in strong partnership, trying to do what they can to keep those families housed. We also expect that out of both the state and federal stimulus packages, that there will be some additional aid as part of those programs as well. One of the benefits of the Section 8 program is that it's stable and it already has government and federal funding behind it. And so that's one area that we can continue to leverage as we try to keep our families housed.
If I can add, in conversation with the executive director, what she has said to me is that if the tenant's income comes lower because of this virus, that HUD will pay that difference. However, if it gets too low and they can't pay at all, this particular ordinance would protect them against eviction.
Thank you. One of the concerns that I'm hearing that the property owners are describing is about their property rights. And if this isn't fairly proposed, then are they going to be risking more of the ask in the future of giving up more or having to take more, or any circumstances that go beyond the scope of this moratorium?
I think the city attorney would agree with me that these are unprecedented times, and these measures are unprecedented as well. I think it's very important that they be limited in scope and duration in an effort to really place a focus on community health and well-being as we try to get a handle on this disease. Just this morning, the new numbers of positive coronavirus infections, I believe, is now over 40,000 nationwide. We now have, we're the third highest in the world. All of our health experts expect that curve to continue unless we take immediate actions. This is one example of that, but I do agree that it needs to be balanced and it needs to be narrow as we approach these efforts.
Speaking of unprecedented times, and understand how important it is to protect our families from being evicted, is there any language in this ordinance that provides the ability for landlords for making the payment arrangements with the clients? So there's nothing there?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can the landlord make the payments for the tenant?
No, payment arrangements in this process. The tenant says that they can't pay the amount, or that that the efforts, for example, an example that you had mentioned is if the landlord were able to go to a program to ask for relief that their tenants didn't do, so that there's a gap there, and they didn't have an agreement in any way. What do we know, or what will we put into place to allow the landlord to still be able to apply if there's any funds available for landlords to offset the cost of the loss of the tenant not paying?
I would say the goal is to ensure that these financial aid packages have safeguards in place to ensure that the funds are being used for what they were allocated for. If it's intended for a renter to help offset their rent, or it's to help provide a backstop for landlords, that's absolutely important. And I know that that's been part of the discussions as these additional financial aid packages come forward, making sure the dollars are going to the right place.
I would just add that I'm expecting that, much like FEMA and earthquakes, that at some point in time, people who wish to be reimbursed for losses will have to document what those losses are. So it may be tenants, it may be landlords, it may be tenants and landlords who are in need of documenting. And this is sort of a one way of encouraging people to document their losses, so that when hopefully the time will come when there is reimbursement available, they'll be ready to go with a documented list of what they're seeking reimbursement for.
That sort of goes into my next question about FEMA hasn't declared California yet as one of the emergency locations, but have we seen anything? I know that it's been declared already, I think, in New York. So what kind of language has already come out for the state of New York, for FEMA, for the circumstance it's probably ahead of us when it comes to the tenant landlord, kinds of situations, so we can anticipate or educate the public and the property owners and the tenants on what's available?
Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, I'm not sure what determination FEMA has made in New York. We have been trying our best to stay on top of this evolving situation, but I did see a notice that came through from the League of California Cities this morning that there was a federal declaration of emergency, and I know that was something the California Governor's Office had been asking for. I would suspect that FEMA will be sure to follow.
And I listened to part of an interview with Governor Cuomo this morning on my way into work. I'm not sure they know in New York. It is very fast moving, as the city manager said. And everybody's just trying to remain flexible. And any of these issues that come up, the council, again, remains in charge. And the council can come back and adopt resolutions, adopt additional ordinances, modify this ordinance as they see fit by majority vote, or majority vote, or perhaps an emergency, depending on the circumstances, to address those kinds of issues, because they're certainly going to come up, because we don't know what is in the short term for sure, and in the long term also.
Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, just to clarify my last comment. So we did receive word that California secured what's known as a presidential major disaster declaration to support the state's COVID-19 emergency response efforts. And with that comes some additional mutual aid. You may have heard that the National Guard have been called out to assist in certain areas, including at our local food bank. And we will continue to follow FEMA's actions on that same note.
Thank you for your patience. We also include an ad hoc committee made up of tenants, property owners, and those with the social service agencies that have the resources, so that at the time that we're doing this as a short-term, very narrow moratorium, that rather than coming back on another emergency situation, we could then have that task force participate, create the dialogues necessary, and then return to us in the event we need to extend this? Is that a possibility? And if so, how would that look?
I've got to slow down a little bit.
Exercise if you'd like to take it over.
So, Councilmember, yes, we would absolutely welcome an opportunity to work with a task force of our local landlords, real estate stakeholders, as well as our renters and tenants. Obviously, we're all moving a mile a minute right now, but as we have opportunities to breathe and work collaboratively, we're always committed to doing so.
Would that need to be incorporated in this moratorium, or would this be as an advisory side note, just to be sure of where we put that in the process?
There's two avenues to there's two avenues for an ad hoc committee. A non-Brown Act ad hoc committee would be appointed by the mayor, and a Brown Act ad hoc committee would be appointed by the council.
But again, upon taking action, does it need to be part of the motion?
No, this ordinance stands by itself. The mayor would not need a resolution, would not need a proclamation, would not need anything. All she could just say, I appoint an ad hoc committee if the mayor does it alone. If the mayor doesn't do it and the council wants to do it, or the mayor wishes the council to do it, then it's a Brown Act committee, and it has all the noticing requirements and so on and so forth. And that also would be, in the future, it would not be part of this ordinance.
Different action. And I understand the rent freezes and the late fees.
Councilmember, if I could clarify that, because I want to be very clear on this point.
In terms of increased rent.
Well, you mentioned rent freeze, and I want to be very clear that this ordinance is not a rent freeze. It is not a rent abatement. It creates a framework for tenants and landlords to work through payment agreements through these unprecedented economic challenges we're in, resulting from the COVID-19 emergency, very specifically. And we are encouraging our tenants and renters to continue paying what they can. Ultimately, all rent will come due, and it's in their best interest to continue paying what they can through this period, and to not look at this as being an opportunity to not pay rent, because at the end of this, rent will come due, and renters have a responsibility to their landlord to pay rent.
I would add that I don't think the city of Watsonville has the authority to impose a rent freeze because it's been preempted by state law. It's capped at 5% a year, as I recall, on most housing.
What is the impact of excluding commercial in this moratorium?
Well, Mayor and Council, for those of you that have had an opportunity to look through some of the written and oral communications that have come in addition to concerns we're hearing from residential renters worried about making the rent payments, we have also heard from business tenants that are equally worried about continuing to make their rental payments for their business leases, many of whom, as you all know, have been required to close during this period of time. Some of the correspondents stating that they have attempted to reach out to their landlord but have not heard back. And that's reflected in the record. So I think part of the reason why we, along with Santa Cruz and the County of Santa Cruz, are bringing both commercial and residential is to provide some interim relief, acknowledging that overall trying to keep businesses housed as well as renters housed has some overlapping benefits for both, and keeping people employed as best we can. And I think for those same reasons, it was included in the governor's executive order, providing an opportunity for cities to take action on both commercial and residential.
The verbiage reads, shall remain in effect until the local public health agency declared by the Watsonville City Council is terminated, but it doesn't line up with the date. Are we going to override this shall remain in effect and make sure that we conclusively keep the date and very clear end game on this emergency ordinance?
My proposal, uh, alternative language, new improved, is May 31st, 2020, mirroring Santa Cruz City, Santa Cruz County, and Monterey County. And that would be clear, I would think. And that is my amended proposal that I'm proposing today, to be distinguished from Friday, which was coexistent with your declaration of emergency.
The report also reads that staff could prepare outreach materials for both tenants and landlords that give more detail. Have these materials been prepared, and what will be included in them, and how can people get access to them?
We, in anticipation of the council's action today, are already preparing materials. We have an FAQ that's been developed. We will be working on social media, local media outreach as well. And again, out of the best interest of our tenants as well as our landlords, we want the ordinance to be crystal clear in terms of what the expectations are and how it will be implemented.
I received a phone call from the Pajaro Valley Shelter, and they have also shared with them their concern and mentioned about this impact. Has anybody from staff reached out to them, because they are working very closely with the transitional housing component in our community, and they've told us that this particular emergency moratorium would be significant to them as well. So has there been outreach to the PV shelter and those agencies that are doing that kind of transitional housing?
I have not spoken to the PV shelter myself, no.
Nor have I.
Would you like me to repeat that? Just for the benefit of the council members on the line, the question was, have I spoken with PV shelter about the ordinance? And I responded that I have not.
What ability do the landlords have in asking the city or social service agencies that receive or will be receiving the stimulus for the tenancies, for the tenants in that part of it? Will they be available, or will we know more, or when would we know more about anything that may be available in the stimulus in the event the documentation is there that something wasn't able to be worked out and the tenant vacates upon the moratorium lift and doesn't pay the landlord whatsoever?
Tamana's getting her steps in. I think we're going to see the aid come through in a number of different forms. This week, we should know whether or not Congress is going to take action on a federal stimulus package. There was a vote over the weekend that failed, as many of you know. They expect to bring it up for another vote in a matter of days. So we expect to have details on the full package. I think it would be very unlikely if they don't take action on it by the end of this week, if not in the next few days. Some of what they're discussing would be direct payments that don't appear to have strings attached to them, right? And so in that form of aid, a tenant would be making a decision as to how they may be using, for example, a $1,000 check that comes through. Am I applying that towards my rent, towards my food, towards my utility bills? I also think there will be some forms of aid that come through that are more prescriptive, more explicit as to how they can be used for rental assistance programs, for example. We will continue to follow all forms. And I think there's no one solution to this. We're going to have to continue looking at all options that come before us as the state and the feds continue to take action over the coming days.
An arbitrary question here. How will we determine repayment if the tenant has no collateral in order to do so? I mean, that's the process that is still up in the air for the owners. If the tenant doesn't have the ability, will not have the ability. The concern that we have, of course, is the further out this goes, that they have limited or no ability to pay just compounds this problem even further in terms of getting themselves caught up again, and other opportunities or situations that the property owners might have. If there's no proper documentation or consistent documentation that an owner would have that they'd have to complete to ask for the aid for what may be missing in terms of the income off of these rents, how are we going to make sure that we're giving the help to those that have gone without the income in that consequence?
Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, city attorney, may have some thoughts on this as well. I also want to acknowledge that we know that the vast majority of our landlords in town are responsible landlords. They're already negotiating many of these types of agreements with their tenants. And it's often part of the rental industry as a landlord. It's not uncommon for landlords to work collaboratively with their tenants when they're facing financially hard times. So what this provides is a short duration to do what many of our landlords frequently do on their own. I do think it's important that the duration and time frame be as short as possible. And the council could consider continuing for staff to bring this forward for future consideration as this crisis evolves, with an eye towards trying to limit the length where possible. Obviously, the longer a tenant goes with paying less than their full rent or falling behind on their rental payments, and the deeper that hole gets, the tougher a position they'll be in long term in terms of their own financial health as well. So I think we all have a shared interest for this to be as limited as possible, providing direct, very specific emergency relief during this time, and trying to keep this from dragging out any longer than it absolutely needs to.
I would just add to the city manager, the vast majority of the landlords appreciate a good tenant, and the vast majority of the good tenants appreciate a good landlord. They want to maintain the relationship during difficult times. I just believe that to be true. In the unlikely event that those narrow circumstances where things somehow go awry, my guess is the parties can still agree with respect to what rent might be owed, if any. And if they can't agree to that, at the end of the day, it would be in some sort of an unlawful detainer action. But I just anticipate that to be a very, very, very small percentage of the landlord-tenant situations in Watsonville.
Yes, thank you. Because I do know the worry that I'm hearing from the property management companies, and I will conclude with this remark, is that they get so far behind that rather than making a payment plan to continue to stay there, they'll just up and leave. And that leaves the landowner without any compensation for them to then move on and find another location. And that is a tremendous risk and an imbalance when it comes to the economy. And I'll save the rest for my comments later. Thank you.
Thank you, Trina. Felipe or Lowell, are you wanting to come ask any questions for clarification or technical questions?
All my questions have been answered.
Okay. Felipe?
I'm not going to touch it.
You must take precautions. Go ahead, Felipe.
So in the part that it takes for the tenant to notify the landlord that they're not going to be able to make the full payment or make the payment, they have to notify prior to the rent being due. I'm wondering with cases that people that were immediately laid off as non-essential back in the 2 weeks ago or longer. For folks like that, but I was wondering about folks that for the notification to the landlord that they couldn't make full payment or payment. It needs to be done prior to the rent being due. I'm wondering for folks that were affected by this immediately after they got placed on non-essential work status, how are they going to deal with this moving forward now? Like, for example, that it's the 23rd and they have to do this by before the 31st or before the end of the month. Is it possible to make some sort of communication with the landlord and then provide the rest of the documentation, verifiable documentation afterwards? Or how can that work out? I'm talking about this given month right now that we're already 1 week left in the month.
There's a couple ways of dealing with that. Our ordinance, as you correctly state, requires the tenant to give notice that he or she is not going to be able to pay rent before the rent becomes due. And some cities have said they only have to raise it as an affirmative defense in the unlawful detainer action. Some have placed it in arrears. It's within your legislative policy-making authority to pick a date. To the extent it's later, sometimes people, they hope things will get better. They don't get better. They don't tell the landlord, and it becomes insurmountable. The landlord is miffed because the landlord didn't get a communication. So if you delay it, you run into those problems. If you put it early, like this ordinance is written, you run into the problems you've identified. And there is no silver bullet here. To some extent, please the landlord group of the community, and sometimes please the tenant community. But the date that you select is your date to select. It's not. There's no silver bullet here. I believe. Well, I'll just stop there.
Thank you, because I was concerned about folks this month. I mean, the following month, the language is fine, but given that there's a week left in this month, it is a concern. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other council members, either at home or here, that want to ask clarifying question or technical questions? Hearing none, we will begin the public hearing now, and we can allow the first person to come in. But in the meantime, I think we have a phone call, and we'll listen to the phone call first. But please allow the person out in the lobby that wants to speak to come on.
So go ahead and give us your name, please. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Georgia Acosta, Board Trustee for Pajaro Valley Unified School District. While I am not speaking to you today in my official capacity, I do want to note my position on Pajaro Valley Unified School District's governing board, as I know you heard from my board's president, Trustee Daniel Dodge Jr., and one of my other colleagues, Trustee Jennifer Shocker, at your last city council meeting regarding the creation of an ad hoc committee between the city of Watsonville and Pajaro Valley Unified School District, and I fully support this idea. I believe that with the combined efforts between the city of Watsonville, with your affiliation with the National League of Cities and PBUSD, with our affiliation with the National School Board Association, our community will greatly benefit from the creation of this ad hoc committee. I was actually our school board's federal representative in the past 3 years with the National School Board Association, and I understand the legislative process at the federal level very well. So as a resident of the city of Watsonville and a governing board member of PBUSD, I'm volunteering to be a part of this committee and look forward to being a part of this ad hoc committee, which I'm full well confident will be very beneficial for both the City of Watsonville and PVUSG. There could be, and in my experience, there will be vast reservoirs of new funding available that a finely tuned partnership between the school district and the city of Watsonville could bring back to Watsonville. So let's move forward with this idea, I hope. Now, regarding the topic at present with the moratorium on evictions for the city of Watsonville, I want to express my deep, deep concern for our school children being possibly evicted from their homes, as our students are now learning from their homes. So I plead with all city council members to seriously consider the impact on our school children who are now having to do their schooling from home. You should prioritize only the residential portion of this policy. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all good health.
Very much. Okay, we have our first speaker. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, council and mayor and various appointed officials. Steve Trujillo, Pajaro Village in District 7. As a former landlord and also a former tenant, I have listened to all the arguments so far that I've heard today. And what does not come up is the fact that we need to recognize that this is a unique situation. This is a unique crisis. And what apparently landlords don't understand is the city council does have some powers of eminent domain, and they need to use them. I would suggest that the city go in league with other cities of similar socioeconomic status that are also not very wealthy, and go to the Attorney General and see about a 6-month rent freeze for both commercial and residential properties, which we very desperately need. We are now in early spring. The weather is not particularly cooperating, although it is because of the fact we need rain, but it's cold and wet off and on now into April. This is not a time for evictions. Like that is insane. And if we are a just society, that is what we need to recognize, that this is not the time to throw people out of their homes or their apartments or their mobile homes or whatever, and then tell them that, oh, well, and we're going to raise your rent, by the way, when it's over, we're going to raise your rent by 5%. Well, they may not have that. That's insane. It's ridiculous. I have a handout here from the New York Times, which I read daily. And Erwin, if you would give one copy to the mayor and one copy to the city manager, I greatly appreciate it. This isn't just a problem here. It's nationwide, it's continent-wide, and it's worldwide, folks. And you need to do right by the people, go to work every day, pay their taxes, obey the law. And I'm sorry, landlords, but you know what? Some of you are going to have to just sell your extra Teslas, hawk your jewels at the pawn shop, and maybe cancel your vacation at your timeshare. Too bad. Boo-hoo. You need to recognize that you are not a landed gentry class. This is not the feudal system of the 1500s in Europe. And you need to recognize where you get your money from, and that is from your tenants. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have another person waiting. Okay, can we have our next speaker then? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dory Rose Inda. Thank you, City Council, City Manager, staff. And I don't want to repeat everything I said on Friday. It's today, Monday. It's a blur. But I do want to stress a few points that have been made already and add again a public health lens to this. I am the Director of Salud para la Gente, and as part of a county or cross-regional effort of healthcare providers, hospitals, and clinics, we are working hard and fast to do everything possible to prevent the spread of COVID-19, as are the cities and the counties and the school districts. And what I believe is the majority of the community, as I walk around and hear and see people working really hard to obey and follow the shelter-in-place ordinance. The shelter-in-place ordinance is the essential strategy to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in this pandemic. It allows people both to protect themselves and their families from being exposed outside their homes, and it protects the rest of the community if they happen to be ill from exposure from them. If we can't, a very extreme investment has been put into the shelter in place, as shown by the order itself, the state order, all of the impacts it's having on business and services and employees who are either working from home or many just not working anymore, and soon more not to be working as services are reduced and revised in how they're being provided. If we are unable to follow the shelter in place, all of that investment will not work. And so I do understand the tensions of economics that are coming through absolutely every point of strategy around preventing and controlling COVID-19. It is not just this ordinance, it is every decision that's been made so far and every continued decision that is being made by businesses, by services within healthcare and within government. We are all in this together, or we are all at risk together. And I believe and want to believe and want to thank in advance landlords and council and all of the community for coming together and ensuring that this decision of the moratorium on eviction is made today. And I'll stay around in case there are any related health questions or healthcare questions. I'm happy to answer, but I just
Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor, City Manager, and council members and everybody. My name is Kathleen Oliver, and I'm a lifelong resident of Watsonville and a local broker. And I used to be a tenant, and I'm currently a landlord. And for the record, I don't own a Tesla or a timeshare, so I don't have anything to sell, according to Steve. However, I just wanted to let you know that there are a lot of landlords out there that are not the way they're described by the first speaker. I did some research before coming in. We have over 400 units that we manage. And of those 400 units, there's 300 owners, over 300 owners, 71 depend on their rental income for their income. It is a retired person who had to go to a retirement facility, and the rent is paying for the retirement facility for them to stay there, that kind of thing. And 231 depend on rent income to pay their mortgage. And so I'm so glad to see the mortgage relief in the governor's, or the discussion of, not mortgage relief, mortgage assistance. But so this ordinance is going to affect over 95% of our landlords that we manage for. And I just wanted to let you know that not all of them are these big conglomerate corporations with rentals. The other thing is, I wanted to let you know, just happened this morning, the abuse has already started. Trina had mentioned something about the verifiable documentation. We had a tenant call today, and he said he's out of work, and we have to stop the eviction that we started back in February. And the eviction is due to an owner is selling his home. Well, he said to my employee, I'm sorry, I'm protected under coronavirus and you can't evict me now. So the abuse is already starting. So the verifiable documentation, I believe, is really important to have inside this ordinance. And if a council member would like to make that, if it needs to be added extra in there, that would be great. The other thing is with regard to unintended consequences, and it didn't dawn on me until I was listening to everybody, with regard to the utility bills, If a tenant leaves and leaves a utility balance and does not pay it, and a landlord has to pay it, if that landlord does not pay it, there will be no utilities on that house, period. So the landlord will not be able to re-rent the house. So that's something that if you could address it somehow, that would be great. I don't know if it's possible or not. And the last item I had was with regard to commercial tenants. I don't know if you still have it in the current ordinance, but I believe that the city relies on commercial tenants' taxes. And so if you make it so that tenants can't pay rent, the city doesn't get taxes, something like that. I'm not a commercial rental property manager, but it just came up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, I know there's somebody else waiting, but we do have a phone call, and we're going to go ahead and take the phone call. Okay, it appears that we're having difficulty with the phone call, so if the next speaker can come forward now. And if you just wait until she gets to you.
Hello, my name is Nick Belides, 305 Second
Could you
Street.
get closer to the mic, please?
My name is Nick Belides, 305 Second Street. And first thing when I do when I go home, I'm going to check my temperature because I've agreed with way too much of what your city attorney's been saying. He was waving me off a little while ago. I'm not against the governor doing the order that he did. I'm not against the concept of doing this emergency ordinance at a local level, but I'm really upset and I'm ashamed that you didn't reach out to the community. You had the time. This is not a 1 week emergency. There is absolutely no way, and I know the city attorney can confirm this, that anybody could be legally evicted on short notice in this time. It's impossible. The courts are backed up. They're making it low priority. Last week, you could have reached out. You could have contacted property owners. You could have contacted the Board of Realtors. You could have contacted any of these people that you know that are part of this community. And you could have said, look, we are going to pass something. We would like some input. You could have done that last week. You could have set a powwow for a couple of days, and held an emergency meeting Thursday, Friday of this week, and then maybe none of this agitation would have happened. I think it's very obvious that we're already seeing the professional agitators, the usual agitators that try to get things stoked up and that give out false information out there, and then tenants are going to, some are going to freak out, some are going to take advantage because they're told of this, and then you're going to have a mess beyond belief. We're not even talking about the subletters. How many people are tenants and they're subletting? You know, those poor people that are renting a garage in back someplace or something like that, realistically, they don't have any rights. Why? Because they don't bother. And now all of a sudden there's going to be all this anger and fear and everything like that. You were supposed to be the cooler heads. You were supposed to reach out to the community and say, let's talk. 2 days, 3 days, let's iron something out. Maybe we won't get everything. You should have at least reached out to them. Now, on a legal issue, I have real concerns about the way that meeting went on Friday. There is no complete public record. Calls cut out, everything like that. Really think you should have stopped that thing completely because you have an incomplete public record. Now you're continuing the meeting, which is a continuance of a screwed up meeting. So this one I think is all already suspect legally on how it might hold up, because if there's any legal challenge, there is no complete public record. You're going to go into a court if there's a challenge of any kind, and you're going to say you're going to be presenting evidence to a court that you don't have.
Please finish your sentence.
I would urge that you start the process over, ram it through, tell everybody, reach out to the community and say, we're going to hold an emergency meeting Friday or Monday.
Thank you for your
next week.
comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it appears that we have another phone call, but get ready for the next speaker.
No, he's done. Yes, please.
Okay, we'll start now then. Watsonville, third generation, and manage commercial property here in Watsonville. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, once again, disappointed that this, I agree with the last speaker, disappointed at Watsonville's lack of transparency with trying to sneak this ordinance through. We and almost all other property owners were not contacted ahead of time or notified last week of your quote emergency city council meeting. Apparently this issue has been brought to the table by what I understand to be, according to the county clerk, 250 almost identical or similar template emails backed by an organization out of Santa Cruz, people that do not work or live in Watsonville. Why are we reacting in an emergency manner based on this manufactured request from out of the area individuals? How did this get so far with such importance? Why aren't you in contact with your local citizens, renters, and local stakeholders? The only reason we are talking today is that basically the city was caught last week trying to sneak a political ordinance through quickly without public comment. You do not have all or even some of the details of what is going to be done at the federal, state, or county level. It is premature to pass any emergency ordinance like this. Why would you not wait to see what others do and then try and fill in the gaps? As a manager of both commercial and residential properties, I want the council to know that we always have and continue to work with our tenants during all crisis and personal financial challenges, the coronavirus pandemic and economic crisis. We work with our commercial and residential tenants, regularly waive late fees, defer, or even abate rent, etc. The ordinance that you are considering, I believe, will create an even greater economic crisis. We live in a wonderful, caring community. I implore you to trust your community. We're already working out these obvious issues. Why are you scared of trusting the private community to work this out? If we cannot then, and then only, you can come back with an ordinance. This ordinance, should you continue, definitely commercial should be left out. If you're going to keep the residential in there, it should have a 30-day limitation or maybe an end date of April 30th. This is a reduction of our rights as citizens and property rights. The city is setting itself up for countless lawsuits, I believe. This will destroy many commercial properties and management companies which employ many, and the ripple effect will kill many other small businesses and operators. For instance, current projects in process, like grocery stores, in the new grocery stores being built in the city, will very likely not move forward with this if this ordinance passes. The commercial property owners and commercial properties pay for many of the property taxes and expenses that fund the city. I won't go into the obvious things, but commercial properties can also be.
If you can please finish your statement, your time is up now.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any more public that would like to speak?
There's no more public, but we do have emails that Natalie's going to be reading.
I know that. Okay. Since there's no more, there is a public. Yeah, no? Oh, I saw you standing, so I thought, okay. We do have quite a few emails that will be read. If they could be read at this time now.
Yes, City of Watsonville. Okay. You're going to hold for a second. We have someone else.
housing are
You
essential.
can't be heard.
Thank you. All right. Food and housing are essential to everyone, and as a country, we should make sure that all are affected by financial hardships related to COVID-19 should be assisted. Some residential tenants will specifically need rental assistance, but the help should come from governmental agencies, not from the backs of small business owners that may own a triplex, fourplex, or small apartment complex. Apartment owners are small businesses, just like the corner grocery store, the laundromat, a plumber, or roofer. We have expenses such as mortgages, property taxes, utilities, and maintenance that must continue to be paid. No one is asking the grocer, laundromat, or plumber to defer payment for goods or services. Tenants' hardships may last for months. If 2 out of 3 or 2 out of 4 of my tenants stop paying rent, then I'm going out of business and there will be fewer rentals available. If tenants need food assistance, they apply and receive assistance. If a tenant needs housing assistance, they should be able to apply and receive that assistance as well. We are all in this together, and the assistance should come from all of us. As a community, we should be making sure that apartment owners are able to stay in business and provide the housing that our community needs.
Could you read the name of the person?
Joe Hutchins.
Okay, we have somebody online, and so if you can just wait a moment, go ahead.
I request we continue with emails until they make contact.
I'm going to go ahead and do the email, okay? Okay, go ahead and do the email, if you can read an email. Yeah, why don't you just come up all the way, come up, yeah.
So much helpful. See, I can put it here.
All right. Am I on? Yeah. Okay, this next one is from Bill Hansen. I hope all of you are doing well given the crazy, unprecedented events we are amidst in the moment. Hopefully each of you were able to find some peace over the weekend. Please keep your families and yourselves safe during this time, and remember we will get through this together. Keeping togetherness in mind will help all of the important decisions each of you have upon you at the moment. Immediate assistance is required for tenants, both commercial and residential, during this global pandemic. The majority of landlords understand this and are already discussing workout arrangements with their respective tenants. I applaud the efforts the various federal, state, and local governments are planning, although we need action. We need to attack this from a holistic approach, considering all parts of the equation. Assistance for residential and commercial tenants with their economic hardships should be immediate. State and local government housing programs, as well as the Small Business Administration, would appear to be the most prudent way to quickly assist with these economic hardships. Suspending rental payments to the property owners only contributes to the economic shutdown. We have all heard about boots on the street, although now we need to have dollars on the street. When a natural disaster hits, we respond with FEMA and insurance adjusters with blank checks. Federal and state assistance with the local housing authority and the Small Business Administration would appear to provide a backstop for this current situation. We need to have financial assistance to the individuals suffering from layoffs and reduction in their hours, as well as the loss of income to the small businesses. Commercial property owners rely solely upon the monthly rental payments to satisfy their respective financial obligations. Interrupting the rental stream has a domino effect on our local and regional economies. Should the rental stream be interrupted, the respective commercial and residential property owners' payments to banks, city utilities, county property taxes, insurance, landscapers, maintenance, security, PG&E, and employees servicing the properties will cease.
The default to the various vendors will initiate credit deterioration and contractual defaults. This component of the conversation needs to be addressed. The below is copied directly from the County of Santa Cruz Treasurer's Tax Collector's website, which is April Property Tax and COVID-19 Frequently Asked Questions. So the quote is, "We understand and share the public's anxiety and concern about the impacts of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. While we cannot change the April 10th deadline for the second installment of property taxes because the deadline is set by state code, we can waive penalties, costs, or other charges resulting from tax delinquency due to reasonable cause and circumstances related to this crisis. Remember that critical county services needed during this time are dependent on those scheduled revenues."
Okay, thank you for those comments. But we have somebody on the phone.
Hello,
Hello.
you're on. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name.
Great. Thank you. Hi, this is Chris Coda on Friday. Again, I want to reiterate on Friday, we found out during the meeting, somebody called us and told us, "Are you listening right now on what the city's debating?" So we were never notified, and we're pretty sure something would have passed on Friday without anybody knowing if other people didn't get involved. So my first question is, why are you punishing all landlords when there's just a few bad apples? It doesn't seem right. Also, commercial businesses that are essential are open now. In addition, as you know, other businesses will need to open soon. There's just no way the economy will be able to survive what is going on right now. Residential people are required to be at their home. Most cities and counties who are enacting similar ordinances are excluding commercial. In addition, as you know, the governor's already issued his order N-28-20 on no evictions. With commercial properties, nobody kicks out or evicts the tenant. You work them, and we always have. We are very good landlords. We care about our tenants. We care about their businesses. We care about their families, and we want them to do well. And if somebody's struggling, we always work with them. In addition, commercial pays the taxes to the city. The city has also stated this. We've heard many times, commercial property makes money for the city, residential does not. Watsonville commercial real estate was not strong before the coronavirus. Why would you severely hurt it now? Look at all the vacancies in town before the coronavirus. In addition, there's no justification for the city of Watsonville to get involved with commercial contracts. You're stepping over hundreds of years of law and legal precedent. The city of Watsonville, which I found was interesting, only has $100,000 to shift to an emergency housing fund. As you can see, the city is not ready, and you expect landlords to be able to make mortgage payments, property taxes, pay employees, etc., without any rental income. As we said, we're here to support the city. We believe this is not well thought out. It is rushed. Things are changing by the minute, by the moment, and we believe there's better solutions that can come from this. And so, thank you. I thank you very much for letting me talk. Bye.
Thank you so much, Chris. Okay, are there more emails?
All right, the next one is from Michael Cox. Dear Honorable Mayor and City Council, no owner wants to evict a good tenant that is not causing trouble but has fallen on rough times, especially when everyone is now falling on rough times. The crisis clearly calls on everyone to work together. A landlord versus tenant ordinance that makes rental property owners the exclusive source of rent relief is exactly the wrong message. I think a better approach is a 60-day stay on evictions for any cause, excepting causes that are criminal and threaten the life and safety of other surrounding residents. A stay on evictions will keep folks in place while both owners and renters try to get a handle on what is going on and what to do going forward. I also think each county should create a body of arbitrators available to owners and renters that are in disagreement about payment. There could be a sliding scale fee schedule by which the parties pay in accordance with their current income. If you must stay the course, please consider the changes below. Drop the inclusion of commercial properties. The proposed rent and eviction moratorium interferes in commercial contracts between parties of potentially equal standing. Commercial real estate law is exceptional as compared to residential real estate law. Commercial law has its own widely held principles. One of these is that the parties in a commercial contract are considered to be of equal standing. The parties have outlined their mutual covenants and considerations and have come to mutually agreed terms. Unlike people seeking a place to live, commercial businesses do not feel captive. They can choose from a variety of alternatives. Commercial businesses will walk and/or seek legal remedies if they feel hard done by. Legal and financial equality is often a characteristic of commercial rental relationships. A city seeking to cut off the rent from only one side of the relationship, the property owner, is significantly unequal and unjust. Make sure ambiguity is minimized and the term and conditions for residential rent relief are clearly specified, equitable, and just. The ordinance must state it only applies to rent and eviction due to non-payment of rent. Clarify that the ordinance is for a rent deferral and not a rent cancellation. Specify deadlines and timelines. New law that is poorly worded and highly ambiguous will lead to expensive and time-consuming legal challenges. Make sure the ordinance has a clear beginning and end date. Terms like significant need to be defined, otherwise who knows whether the meaning is significant to the city, the rental property owner, the tenant, or all the parties. Do not sweep under the carpet the fact that a large percentage of commercial businesses have far greater cash flow and resources than the rental property owner. Is there a way to allow for that as a consideration? For example, a millionaire can stop paying rent by simply showing.
Thank you very much for those comments. If you can read the next one.
Next one is from John Sigismondi. Dear council members, I have been reading Ordinance 20-318, which aims to protect residential and commercial tenants from eviction stemming from financial hardships caused by COVID-19. As an employee of Berman Enterprises and statewide properties, I am opposed to allowing commercial renters an opportunity to avoid rent payments for 6 months. It is possible that this situation could cause a domino effect with dire results to commercial landlords who may be unable to keep their properties safe and in good repair. Furthermore, employees and property managers of commercial landlords could face layoffs and termination, thereby compounding the problem and causing more hardships in this uncertain time. Sincerely, John Sigismondi.
You can continue.
Next one is from Raid Farhat. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I want to begin by thanking our police and fire department, our nurses, doctors, as well as those in the medical field. Also, all our teachers that will need to adapt and learn a new way of teaching our children. They are all heroes. I also want to thank city staff and all council members for working diligently for our community and for being a voice for our most vulnerable community members. I agree that assistance is needed for our commercial and residential tenants during these challenging times. I have spoken with many landlords in Watsonville and have been hearing the same thing over and over. How can we help? Is this the question that I keep hearing? We as landlords need to step up, and we will step up to help our tenants. However, as written, the proposed ordinance only looks at the issue from one perspective, the tenants. It fails to take into consideration the landlord's perspective. If we cannot collect our rent, we cannot pay our mortgages, taxes, insurance. We won't be able to pay our employees to maintain our properties, which would mean our neighborhoods would deteriorate. Is that the image we want for Watsonville when we have been working so hard to clean it up? Below is the text from the Santa Cruz County tax collector. We understand and share the public's anxiety and concern about the impacts of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. While we cannot change the April 10th deadline for the second installment of property taxes because state code sets the deadline, we can waive penalties, costs, or other charges resulting from tax delinquency due to reasonable cause and circumstances related to this crisis. Taxes will not be waived or deferred. I am sure the City of Watsonville needs all residents to continue to pay utility bills. Is the city planning on allowing all tenants not to pay these? Insurance premiums will not be waived or deferred. Are we supposed to lay off our contractors, handymen, electricians, plumbers, landscapers, painters, office staff, and everyone who works with us to help keep our buildings safe and clean? When we need to obtain financing for our properties, the banks require us to prove our income. I am appalled that some would think everyone should be able to get relief.
Thank you. You have another?
I do.
Okay.
This is from Carol Kuzdeni. And she says, please adopt this ordinance. The way to make people and their families sick and keep them sick is to make them homeless. Next one is from Haj Tut. I want to express concern and warn that in passing this uncodified urgency ordinance, we would be engaging in hugely disruptive interventions without firm evidence of the facts or the ramifications that these unproven impacts will have on the local economy. Strongly suggest that council takes the time and gathers as much information as possible before even considering such a potentially devastating moratorium. And given that the emergency meeting was conducted in such a rash manner, I could not imagine that an appropriate amount of thought has gone into this issue, and passing without any knowledge of the federal government's plans or aid would not only be a huge disservice to our local population, but rather an irresponsible action. Thank you.
About how many more do you have?
I have 2 more.
Okay, go ahead.
This one is from Rose Marie McNair. Honorable Mayor and City Council members, I am sending this letter today to ask that you consider very carefully the unintended consequences of this emergency ordinance, which, if implemented, will have far-reaching negative impacts, not only on tenants, landlords, but the entire community. As a realtor now in my 44th year of business in real estate, I have been involved as a housing advocate during all these years, and now nearing the age of 77 years, I am also a tenant who resides in the city of Watsonville. When we look at the history of nearly half a century, we gain a perspective of our community, one that has survived many difficult times, one of which was the earthquake in 1989. What is amazing about the strength of our community is that all of the people stepped up, assisted wherever they could, and worked in partnership together. This proposal before us today is not going to create harmony, but rather will promote a very negative ripple effect socially and economically. The mandates of this proposal need careful analysis and revision by you as leaders of our wonderful city. Please provide thoughtful consideration to the following. 1. Tenant and landlords are partners in one of the greatest human needs, housing. Together they form a bond. Yes, there are some bad landlords and some bad tenants, but overall, the large majority are good. I have seen wonderful relationships happen. Over the years, not a lot of varied types of housing have been built, so our supply is limited. Let's strive to create more housing availability. These mandates will act as disincentives to the availability of housing. Council members with careful planning can provide leadership that, especially in times like this, will inspire rather than create angst. 2, imagine any business with no income with your proposal of 6 months. The mortgage payment, the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance marches on with no means of payment. Our supply is already scant. Owners may be forced to sell or at the very worst lose to foreclosure what tenants need, housing and shelter. We watched the loss of housing when the city of Santa Cruz attempted to pass Measure M, the rent control ballot measure. It lost by a vote of over 60%. Then City of Santa Cruz attempted to place it on the agenda as an ordinance. So a group of us studied the sales of rentals on MLS listings in the city of Santa Cruz during the 9-month period. This proposed measure came to the vote. We learned that 100 rentals were sold by owners in the short who were fearful of period of 9 months. A loss of 100 rentals is a lot. That's 100 families or individuals who lost the possibility of housing and shelter due to the proposal. Had it passed, how many more homes would have been lost? With this proposal, no one can sustain any business with zero income. Many landlords are not fat cats. Usually they are mom and pop owners who have saved and purchased property to help them make ends meet in a very costly area.
Thank you very much.
Last one. This is from Brian Berman. Dear City Council members, Berman Enterprises and statewide properties have been in business in Watsonville for 80 years. Currently, we own both commercial and residential properties in town. We agree with the Council's proposed ordinance 20-318. However, we feel that a distinction should be made between essential commercial and residential properties. For essential commercial properties, the time frame for payback should be reduced. Additionally, as property owners, we still incur fixed expenses in the course of doing business. Is the City of Watsonville willing to defer taxes, fees, and prevent utility shutoffs for non-payment during this moratorium? Many landlords could find themselves in a devastating situation of being denied the means to sustain their properties and businesses. Is it wise of the council to freeze evictions on residential properties? It is wise of the council to freeze evictions on residential properties during this difficult time. However, allowing essential commercial renters to delay rent payments could adversely affect commercial property owners in Watsonville and lead to irrevocable financial blight. Sincerely, Brian Berman.
Thank you very much. And do we still, oh, we have some more? Okay. No, we have some more emails.
Okay, so the following email is from Victor Gomez, and he's asking, Honorable Mayor and City Council, on behalf of the Santa Cruz County Association of Realtors, we would like to take a few moments to comment on your emergency eviction moratorium. We are living in some unprecedented times that are having a negative impact on many of our residents and their economic situations. Businesses are also being impacted by these shelter-in-place orders, in turn, hurting many workers and business owners. We understand and agree the city's need to feel like they have to act to protect residents that are being impacted by these negative economic impacts. But we just ask that you look at the situation as a whole and not just focus on helping some while putting others in greater economic hardship. As you consider your local moratorium on eviction emergency ordinance, we urge you to consider adding or holding up the below recommendations. 1. Verifiable documentation. We urge you to keep all language pertaining to verifiable documentation in your ordinance to keep some from abusing the process. Verifiable documentation should not be very difficult to attain for the renter and would be extremely valuable to the landlord in case the federal government considers financial institution emergency regulations to assist landlords in keeping those units in the rental market without foreclosing. These documents would be extremely valuable. 2. Term of emergency ordinance. We urge you to follow the direction from other regional jurisdictions of the Governor's Emergency Executive Order N2820 and allow this ordinance to sunset on May 31st, 2020, unless extended by the action of the City Council prior to expiration. 3. Payback to landlord. Tenants who accepted protection under this ordinance shall have up to the equal amount of time that was offered for payment or rent deferral. If the renter accepted 2 months of deferral, then they should be given 2 months to pay back. If they accepted 3 months, then they should have 3 months to pay back. Tenants who were afforded eviction protection under this ordinance shall have equal amount of time that was offered for payment for rent deferral after the expiration of this ordinance to pay their landlord all unpaid rent. 4. Local financial support. The City of San Jose and the County of Santa Cruz are considering using local revenues from general funds or other state and federal agencies to assist renters. We ask that you consider forming a local assistance program for renters to help them cover their rents. Even if you pass this ordinance that would defer rent payments for a short period, some may have trouble playing catch-up. The city should explore what kind of financial assistance they can provide from either local or federal resources to assist renters. 5. Local guarantee for landlords. We understand that the city believes this must be passed to protect renters, pushing the financial obligation.
Thank you for that. You have some more?
2 more.
Okay, 2 more? Go ahead.
Okay, so the following email is from Mayra Bernabe and Watsonville COPA leaders. Dear Mayor Garcia and City Council members, thank you for calling this special meeting to address COVID-19 and evictions. In the state of emergency, COPA supports a moratorium on evictions of residential and commercial tenants caused by the failure to pay. COPA represents members of institutions across the region, which include Watsonville First United Methodist Church, the Lutheran Community, Alianza Charter School, and Assumption Catholic Church. We serve the most vulnerable. immigrants, the poor, seniors, people with disabilities, and people suffering from mental health. This is a very volatile time for our community. Since the local emergency was declared, COPA has been contacting families throughout the county to assess the needs and concerns. Many people are worried about their health, of theirs and their loved ones. They're worried about the effect that sheltering in place is having on their income, especially those who are self-employed or hourly workers without sick leave or unemployment insurance. There are threats that our local healthcare system will be overstretched, as has happened in Washington State and New York City. Evicting people from their homes and apartments in these volatile times would be both a crisis for individual families and aggravated the public health crisis for the whole community. You can't shelter in place if you have no place. COPA is asking that the city of Watsonville pass a moratorium on evictions of residents and commercial caused by failure to pay, which should remain in effect for the duration of the local emergency. We ask that this ordinance be amended to include the new recommendations posed by the city attorney regarding documentation. This temporary measure will keep families safe until more sustainable measures can be put in place. Thank you. Mayra Bernabe and Watsonville COPA leaders. Last email. Okay, actually, that should be it.
Oh, okay. Do we still have somebody on the phone? There's somebody on the phone that has already had an email read, but we're going to give them an opportunity to speak now.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council members, city staff. This is William Hanson, born and raised Watsonville, bleed Watsonville blood, definitely a community member and advocate for our beautiful city. One thing that's extremely important is to understand the fluidity of what we're dealing with, number one. And number two, the fluidity of this moratorium and this uncodified ordinance that you folks are proposing. The biggest issue is the documentation. And I just want to make sure we're crystal clear on something. When the city attorney spoke and referenced verifiable documentation could include oral representations, that's just going to make this just a disaster. And so we need to document it. And if somebody has lost their job, or if they have a reduction in hours based on the mandatory shelter in place, the landlords need to be able to work with them. And with this proposed ordinance, as long as there's the documentation, I think any reasonable landlord is going to work with those tenants. From a commercial standpoint, the bottom line is, as business shuts down, revenues shut down, there are a lot of people standing in line to take those slots. So I think whether or not you choose to include or exclude the commercial component in the ordinance, reality is that the landlords are going to have to work with the commercial tenants regardless. Deferring the payments, that's an option. One thing that we all have to understand is, as far as evictions, you don't evict somebody in a day or 2 days. Best case scenario is a 45 to 60 day period through the court systems. And based on everything that's happening now, I would go ahead and double that. I'm not opposed to an ordinance. I think the ordinance just needs to include the safeguards for both the landlords as well as the tenants. Taking of property as contemplated by the proposed ordinance without any sort of documentation is in direct conflict with the 14th Amendment, providing for equal protection under the law. Let's take our time and work collaboratively to figure out a solution. I believe the city attorney, along with city staff and the city council, can go ahead and put the safeguards that would be required to be the prudent way to address this. Again, thank you for your time, consideration, understanding this issue, and we wish you folks the best as you contemplate this ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay. Are there any other emails or audience that would like to address the council? Seeing none, I bring it back to the council, and I will now entertain a motion to accept the proposal the proposal. Aurelio?
Thank you, Mayor, and City Council. Can I make just a few comments before I make a motion?
Go ahead.
I'd like to address everybody as much as possible on this. This is an emergency. There's some community members that have come and expressed that we should have reached out. We should have made a meeting. Well, one of the problems we had was there's a shelter-in-place ordinance or order by the governor and by the state. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for us right now to meet and organize. As it is, just making Brown Act meetings is being a challenge in itself. So it's not that we want to leave you guys out, but this is really fast moving. This is not something that we could have planned for or wanted to plan for. What we're doing is we're taking steps to try to protect as much people as we can from being homeless. I had a discussion with the city manager way before any of this happened that we needed to start thinking about this, but this moved so fast that it's just it's upon us now, and the order is that we need to shelter in place and to bring down that curve, to flatten it. And so I know a lot of people are going to be hurting from that landscaper that worked for that real estate guy that got laid off because he can't afford him no more. Well, now that landscaper can't afford to pay a rent to the other realtor that he's paying. So it's just a domino effect, no matter which way we look at it, and it's going to affect us all. But you know what? One thing that I can stand up here proudly and say that our city of Watsonville is a city that's come together for many times and in many emergencies and many tragedies, and we survive it. But the thing is that we got to work together. And this goes from the tenants to the landlords. The tenants, I know, are willing to work with their landlords. I know there's a few bad apples, like there's a few bad apples in landlords. I've already had some instances where people are telling me, my landlord said, if I can't pay my rent, I got to get out of here. So we have to try to keep people in shelter. That's the key part right here. That's the health part of it. It's not that we're trying to punish the landlords, and it's not that we're trying to give advantage to our tenants. It's just we're trying to save lives. And that's what I want to do, is save lives. If I can save lives, I think I've done good to my community. And so this ordinance that we're putting together in an emergency manner, in an emergency state, can always be looked at, and it can always be brought back. This is not going to be set in stone. This is not going to be set in concrete. We will be continuing to work forward on this. And this is really important for people to understand. And the people to understand also that tenants don't want to leave their homes. They want to try to work it out. The majority will try to work it out. Once we all start getting back to work, once we start getting our commercial buildings going back, hopefully, it's going to take us a little bit of time, but if we all work together, I think we're going to be able to pull this off. And I'll be able to stand here proudly to say, Watsonville again overcame. But with that, I'd like to make a motion for the second staff recommendation from the lawyer for some, well, as amended, but I'm going to make some amendments to it, or try to add amendments to it. On the one, on page 2, City Council, City of Watsonville, hereby ordains as follows. In section 1, I'd like to add from a single, it says no landlord shall endeavor to evict a tenant, commercial or residential, from a single family unit, apartment, townhome, renting a room in a single family unit, or any dwelling that is, which is rent and is being charged in. This is really important because we're trying to protect people from being evicted. And the first ones that are going to be feeling this impact is those folks that are renting those single family rooms or there's garages. So we need to try to really protect those folks. And the other one is on page 3 of the amendment, where it says if a tenant complies with the requirements. I'd like to add verbiage to it where it says on the bottom, otherwise endeavor to evict the tenant or engage in any other form of retaliation or debt collection for non-payment of rent. This is really going out for those landlords that think that if you give me this, you can stay. And it just should be about monetary funds and no favors. And I think one of the other things I need to put in here on page 4 on to amend it, and it's on the paragraph where it says the tenant is not relieved of liability for the unpaid rent after expiration of this moratorium. I want to add that says that the the tenant shall negotiate in good faith with their landlords in repayment of all required rent. Okay, this is not a rent freeze. This is not a free ride. And when I say we need to work together, this is what I mean, that tenants and landlords need to work together, and tenants need to keep up their part, because without commerce, we will be in bigger problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I do have a question on the motion.
No, we need to second it before we can talk about the motion. Is there a second to the motion? Hearing none, I will second it. Oh, I saw Lowell. Okay, Lowell seconded. Oh, okay, okay, go ahead. Okay, now we'll take questions on the motion.
My question to the motion maker was, does it include the new language with verification and the two questions?
Yeah, it's with the new amendment that was made on it. It's not going to say verification of documentation, but it does have language that implies that they did initiate.
As amended by the attorney. Okay. Any other questions on the motion? Okay. We have Trina.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a copy of the new ordinance with a modification from the attorney. What I have is dated, what date is this? So I have it dated 3/18, so I don't have a new ordinance so that I know what is in reference for reading, and I pulled everything up. So I want to see everything in here that's changed, because there were some revisions from this dated 3/18, so that I'm reading what it is that is the language that's been modified since Friday.
Well, this is just an amendment that's being proposed today.
In writing. I'd like to see what it is in writing so that I can read it before I would vote on anything. And I have pulled up everything I possibly could that came to us up to 1:24 p.m. this afternoon. And mine is dated the 18th of March.
Okay, so the motion incorporates the only copy of the ordinance that's out there, and that's the one from Friday, with the two changes that I identified in the PowerPoint and the changes proposed by Aurelio and his statements here. That is the totality of it. There is no written version of that existent that I'm aware of.
So again, the document that was provided to me today, I received in the email at 1:24. I had 35 minutes on my way here to have this pulled to read through what this revision was.
And Mayor and Council, if I may intercede just really briefly. The version you have in front of you, Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, is reflective of Councilmember Gonzalez's amendment. There are changes that he is proposing to the council that he submitted this afternoon.
He is referencing the attorney's changes in the amendment, and that's why I want to be having very crystal clear what I'm reading that I'm going to approve or not approve.
So he is referencing changes that the city attorney proposed in his presentation. There were a couple additional amendments that the city attorney proposed, and we will clarify those as well.
The only changes to Friday was May 31st instead of until the council terminates it. And the second category of change was the change in the documentation requirement. Those are the only two changes that the city attorney made since Friday.
So documentation requirement.
Okay, so the proposal that Aurelio is making is not based on anything other than Friday's ordinance and the two changes I proposed today during my presentation. One of them dealing with changing the expiration till May 31st instead of the end of the emergency period. That's the first change. The second change is the proposed change in language of the documentation requirement to make it align with Santa Cruz County, Santa Cruz City, and Monterey County. From that base, Councilmember Aurelio made a couple other changes verbatim, and those are on the record. That's the only ordinance that exists. What he sent out today is nothing that is part of this ordinance.
Here lies my confusion. What you've told me up here that says change proof of qualification to say demonstrate through documentation or other objectively verifiable means. I don't, other than it being up there, where is it physically in this ordinance if this is the revision that Aurelio had put in?
It is not physically in the ordinance. There's only 3 sources for what is proposed to the council. One source is what you got on Friday. Second source is what's up there on the 2 items. And the third source is what Aurelio said a few moments ago. That's it. What you got emailed that have red lines in it has nothing to do with what we're doing today.
And if I may further clarify that, so with Councilmember Gonzalez's motion that has a second, the council with Councilmember Gonzalez's motion, the council would be approving the amendments that Councilmember Gonzalez highlighted, in addition to those amendments that you see on your screen.
I don't think that was every amendment that Aurelio had to put forward.
Just so she's clear, you need, just to clarify here, City Clerk, could you reread my amendments to the ordinance so my city councilman can understand fully what's going on and not get convoluted with all this paperwork in front of her?
Okay, so under section 1 enactment, it says no landlord shall endeavor to evict a tenant, commercial or residential, and in red, added by Gonzalez, from a single family unit apartment, townhomes, renting a room in a single family unit, or any dwelling in which rent is being charged for non-payment of rent. So until charged, that's in red. Then under section E, second paragraph, it says, so the entire sentence is to qualify for the protection afforded under, in red by Gonzalez, section 1, subdivision A through E, and then as written above, a tenant must do, and he added do, the following. So that ends there. And then under,
yeah, please stop for just a moment.
Hang on,
because
can I stop? Can I clarify? Hang on. Let me restate my motion. Does that sound good to you? And that way she could take it down. Okay, because just remember, these were just notes. All right. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to.
Hang on. Okay, on my motion for amendment was to incorporate the new revisions that were put into the ordinance by the lawyer, and then all I was adding was to section 1 enactment was verbiage that said no landlord, this is already in there, this part is already in there, no landlord shall endeavor to evict a tenant, commercial or residential. I'm requesting to add an amendment from a family single unit, apartment, townhomes, renting a room in a single family unit, or any dwelling in which rent is being charged. That's the only request I'm at on that section, requesting to amend. And the other one was on page 3. It's on the bottom where it says if an tenant complies with requirements of this section. On the bottom, I'm requesting for an amendment, added verbiage that says, or engaged in any other form of retaliation or debt collection. Those were the only 2 verbal amendments that I made.
Okay. Trina, do you have more questions on the amendment now?
I guess I'm asking for clarification of the debt collection when this is already 3-day pay or quit and other endeavor. Is this to define other endeavor so other endeavor is not vague?
Yes, he's saying yes.
All right. For
Okay.
right now, thank you.
Okay, now, are there any further questions, discussion on the motion we have here? Lowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Lowell Hurst here. We're in uncharted territory, and I want to thank staff for helping guide us. I know the public is concerned, staff's probably concerned, council's concerned, renters are obviously concerned, and landlords and commercial property owners are all concerned as well. We have an emergency here. It's been declared an emergency. And so it's uncharted territory that we haven't been into in this particular degree. And so I want to just say thanks to the staff. There's no silver bullet here, but we are all in it together. So let's move forward the best we can, and let's strengthen and cooperate our relationships with everyone, even with physical distance. Thank you.
Very good. We have Ari Parker that would like to make some comments about the motion. Ari, you're on.
Ari, you're on.
Thank you. I have to say that I have a lot of questions about it, only because, and I guess a little bit like Kaufman Gomez, I'm having a hard time seeing everything. I have it up in front of me, and I'm trying to fit everything in, but I'm doing this all by listening. I do have to say the questions I have are that part that was added at the very end about all the other retaliatory things. Isn't that already covered? And maybe Alan can answer that. Isn't that already covered in that generic statement?
What I understand is that added language was to further clarify what is already stated. My understanding is that the added language was to clarify further what was already stated.
It's further than Alan?
Yes, I'm sorry, Councilmember Parker. Could you restate that question? We're having a little trouble with audio here.
Yes, the additional language that Councilman Aurelio put into, I think it was the bottom of page 3, in regards to or otherwise endeavor, and he had a whole bunch more language about retaliation. Is that necessary, or is that covered under the law?
It's a little broader than what we brought before you, but it's within your ability to include and vote on, I believe.
Broader, does it include more, or does what the wording that we already have include all of that as well?
Right now, the ordinance has to do with just stopping evictions. And this has to do with, it sounds like, collection and different forms of retaliatory, different types of eviction, i.e. retaliatory eviction. So it's a little broader. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Okay, and I just didn't want to get into the weeds on things we didn't have to. I'm really concerned with families not being evicted during this time of crisis. I'm concerned with it. I'm also concerned with the broader community that we haven't done our homework, and I take responsibility for that, and been out there communicating in regards to this. And yes, it's been short term, and so we've had to move quickly. At the same time, I don't see how commercial at this point should be included in this I see that commercial is a business contractual relationship, and they're going to work it out, and we can support that. But families need to be protected. Homes need to be protected, and I'm wondering if we could just do all of this in a 60-day moratorium on eviction. A simple 60-day moratorium, and we'll revisit that in between now and then. We can have the public input. We can have community partners at the same time, rather than legislate something that's going to create more problems down the line.
Councilmember Ari, if this motion fails, then you're able to make another motion to include your comments now. But we are working on this motion. If it fails, then we can consider what you just shared. But we're still working on this motion.
I appreciate that, but as you gave latitude, Mayor, to Aurelio to give a large preemptive speech before he did his, I thought that it would be important for people to know that there are other perspectives that the council holds.
Yes, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you. It appears that Felipe wants to address the council.
So I think that, I was willing to support the previous motion. And I think this time we made a sensible corrections to the ordinance that we're doing. I really appreciate staff with all their work, and I appreciate the language change to May 31st as opposed to whenever the council saw fit. And the other language that was changed to actually include to demonstrate through documentation or other objectively verifiable means. It really certainly makes this ordinance a lot more sensible and more of a collaborative effect to it too. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other council members that would like to speak on the motion? It seems like Trina, you'd like to come back up? Sure. Let's clean first, okay?
You didn't touch a thing. I try not to, really.
No, it's all the sweat. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, for the clarification purposes, we've had a lot of comment about the commercial aspect of this. Commercial aspect doesn't house our tenants in terms of safe place to be residing with a roof over their head, that they're safe during this whole crisis epidemic. I'd like to see that we pull the commercial aspect out of this. And my concern about that kind of added language about the retaliation and the other, the ability that the government steps in and stops if there's a case for collection. For example, if a tenant decided that they're going to use this and this is going to go on in a while longer, even maybe perhaps beyond the 31st if it's necessary, to go with the means of collecting if they're not able to, having that language in here would then mean that a landlord wouldn't even have an opportunity to try and recover the costs if there's no participation on the part of the tenant to recover what the lost rents were if that language were to be put in under those circumstances. And I'm concerned about that language. I do respect the fact of us going and being consistent with what the county is as of the 31st. And I encourage the ad hoc committee. Obviously, we're going to do this outside of the scope of doing this for the voting part of it. So that part I'd like to see. The verification or the verifiable documentation, I want that in there, and I appreciate that that's in there, and that it would then be consistent with the process if anybody had resources that they can actually apply for any of those shortfalls that could potentially occur. So I'm not in support of this motion because I'd like to see the commercial removed, and I'd also like to see that language left alone for the purpose of the tenant and the landlord to work the arrangements out on their own without us putting it into the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the other council members? We haven't heard from Francisco. Francisco, did you want to speak?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone who spoke, sent us an email, who expressed their voice about this issue. This has not been easy for any of us. As everyone sort of mentioned, the word unprecedented. This is very much true. And as Aurelia sort of said, we're not picking winners and losers here. I'm really thinking about the bigger picture in all this. And a week ago, in the U.S., we had 4,000 cases of COVID-19. A week later, we're at 41,000. In the same time period, we had 75 deaths due to COVID-19, and today we are over 400. And so I just really want to emphasize and remind people that COVID-19, this pandemic, is a big deal, and it has the ability to sort of to do long-term damage. We're a population here in Baltimore. I think a lot of people are and we're over 60. We have people with comorbidities, with diabetes, with hypertension, with heart disease. And we already had one local resident pass away at the hospital this weekend. And so, COVID-19 is in our doorstep. And if we don't take every measure necessary to take care of each other, this can really, really devastate us for a really long time. And so I understand the economics of everything. I really do. I have rental properties too, and I know that this can really negatively affect me. But the right thing to do right now, I think, is to take care of each other and to think about the community. And hopefully, if things work out, hopefully the state and the federal government will make resources and funding available to make sure that we all make it together. So I just want to thank, again, everyone for calling in. Thank you for all those great landlords that do great things for our community, and for those tenants that follow the laws and follow the rules and are in shelter in place right now. And just thank you to everyone who's working on this. Like I said, it's not easy, but we can do this together. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other council member that wants to speak, then I will call for roll. And remember, we need to have 5 votes in order for this to pass. So roll call, please.
Kaufman Gomez? Estrada?
Yes.
Gonzalez? Yes. Hernandez?
Yes.
Hurst?
Yes.
Parker?
No.
Garcia?
Yes, 5 votes, so it has passed. So thank you very much.
Kaufman Gomez, no. Estrada, yes. Gonzalez, yes. Hernandez, yes. Hurst, yes. Parker, no. Garcia, yes.
Okay. You needed to speak to something?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to ask the attorney, did he mention that we have to put the utilities, make it a separate vote, or was this included with this vote?
I think it was an administrative decision,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's already been made.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so moving on. There's no other emergency items. This is a request and scheduling for future agenda items. Do any of the council members please come on up?
At the recommendation of a lot of the responses that we received as well, I would like to see that we do incorporate an ad hoc committee so that this can be further evaluated with a little bit more everybody coming to the same telephone conference and having the dialogue so that they can better facilitate any changes or anything else before this ever gets renewed again, so that we can work that out more smoothly prior to coming to the council for recommending.
And I would underline that. Yes.
So, Mayor and Council, we would absolutely welcome that opportunity. Again, amidst these emergency times, we are moving quickly. We always endeavor to do as much outreach as we can. These are just unprecedented times, but we will do that work and reach out to those stakeholders, form that task force as we go forward, and keep the communication open.
And the FAQ information about the links for the resources.
Yeah, we hope to have that out today, no later than tomorrow. We're already working on it, so it will be coming out shortly.
Okay, just so that the FAQs and the links on the website for the city are being worked out as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to request for future agenda? Oh, Ari, you're on.
Thank you. I would also like to make I would like to be a part of the PVUSD board president, Danny Dodge, suggested an ad hoc committee with PVUSD and the city in regards to all things federal. I would very much appreciate being a part of that and bringing that to it. I don't know if Taco would like to be a part of that or if you would like to be a part of that, Ms. Mayor. And but I would love for that to be on our future agenda or for you to move forward with that ad hoc committee.
You know what? I'm wondering, and I'm just wondering out loud, if this should be a discussion with the intergovernmental committee to officially create that committee or task force. Well, that's just a thought, but definitely. Oh, I was asking if I wondered if this request could come to the intergovernmental committee to officially create that task force.
I think this is beyond the scope of the intergovernmental committee. Okay. This came directly from the PQSD board president, and this is directly to us as a governmental body rather than a staff intergovernmental committee. This is very different. It's very much focused, as far as I understood from what the three PVUSD trustees said, it's very focused on our federal communication and federal help that we can bring to both the PVUSD as well as the city. And I think exploring all these avenues is very important.
Okay, our city manager wants to speak to that.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I would agree with Councilmember Parker. I think that this is outside the scope of the intergovernmental committee originally being established, but we're happy to reach out to our counterparts with the school district and work on forming an ad hoc committee. We continue to work closely with the school district and all of our community partners as we move forward. So this would just be one more opportunity for that.
Okay. And Trina wanted to speak on this too?
Sounds good, but once again, I'd like to be on that committee.
Right. For clarity's sake, on the request for the ad hoc mayor, it was to include the school district, social service, tenants, property managers, staff, and then a council member, whatever that basis would make. But it is to make sure that we are including the school board on their recommendation to be inclusive with this moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other requests for future agenda items? I have a request. We heard a lot from our who are landlords and from the Santa Cruz County Realtors Association. And so I would like to request that staff research what other cities are doing to include protection of landlords and possibly even homeowners, and to come back to us with some recommendations as to how we might be able to do that. Okay, so next I have adjournment, but before I adjourn, I really want to thank my colleagues. You know, we knew as city council members that we really needed to act quickly in terms of protecting our tenants. And so we asked for an emergency meeting, which we occurred last Friday. and it was almost 4 hours. And you took the risk of saying, okay, we're going to do this through our new technology. And we went forth, and unfortunately that technology failed us. And we had an almost 4-hour meeting. And all of us were very strong participants of that meeting. And when we were unable to come up with a decision, we immediately again said, okay, we're going to do it again. We're going to try again. We're going to do it for Monday. And so here we are almost over 2.5 hours again on Monday, you giving up your time, being with your family. And for those of you that came, you took the risk of leaving your homes. And so I just want to give you a big, big thank you, because what you're doing is you're showing our community that we really have them in our hearts, and we really are here for them and to protect them. And so I just say thank you so much for all that you do for the city. And with that, I adjourn this meeting.